Hi, my name is Yahil, and you may know me as Light. It could be very windy today. I hope that my microphone here, my MP3, helps with that. This is my third vlog. The current state in Israel, the corona death toll is about the number of infected we had last time, and since today is Israel's Remembrance Day, I thought it would be fitting to some degree to go outside and recall some of my military history and story, which wasn't pretty. And if you clicked on this video to see or hear some inspiring Israeli Defense Forces stories, then you are not in luck. Let's start in the beginning. In Israel, the military service is mandatory. You have very little to say on the matter. Most people have no excuses. Some people do, like if you are physically incapable of serving, or if you're mentally incapable of doing that, if you are too religious and you claim that you need to use that time to study the Bible, then you can get a leave. I am a physically capable person, and I grew in a family of military people. My grandfather was an officer, my dad was an officer. Most people in my family were in the armored forces, operating tanks. So I simply grew up with the, natural understanding that I needed to serve my country by joining the military when my time came. I joined the military like a soldier from everyone else, I guess. Nothing special. And apparently I was very persuasive, because the sorting officer didn't want me, he did want me to become a fighter, a warrior, but I didn't want that. And I managed to persuade him and told him that I just wouldn't be very effective doing grunt work. So he said, okay, fine, go. We'll call you when we recruit the non-fighter soldiers. And so when I joined the military, I was put in front of another sorting officer who gave me a few options, but in the end he put me in the communications force. Not in a specific unit, but in a specific role. So I had my course and of course basic training, without much of a combative training. It was very basic, and I learned how to do my job basically, but not really. It was very, very generalized and not particularly hands-on. It was very theoretical, and they taught us a very unuseful things, useless things, I guess you should say. Now, after I finished that, like 3 months after joining the military, I was given a unit. I was sent to the Home Front Command to join a battalion as a communications soldier. And when I joined my battalion, the reception was not great. And by reception, I don't mean the cellular ones, I mean the personal one. On the first night, they didn't really have a bed for me to sleep in. They gave me a mattress, but they didn't give me a room. And they told me, oh, here's a room where one of the soldiers is not in the base. And since he's not in the base, you can sleep in his bed. And so I slept in another person's bed on my first night. And on my second night, I had to move out because the guy returned. And then I didn't know where I could stay. We went from room to room, and people told me, no, you can't sleep here, you can't sleep there, you can't sleep anywhere. And that is until I found a room where the door couldn't close, because something you don't realize about the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is that budgeting is not favorable for the soldiers. The equipment is not incredibly great. You'd think that with the budgets that Israel allows for the military, we would have more things, but we would use very old stuff. We would have used the uniform, work uniform, and overall things worked incredibly great. They were trying to keep things cheap because they had a lot to work with, a lot of people and a lot of units to work with. Now, I found that room where the door wouldn't close. It didn't have a handle, I don't think. It was about December, and it started raining. And I got into that room, and I put my mattress in an empty bed, bunk bed, and I had a place to stay in. And I was joined by another very friendly soldier who was also somewhat new. He used to be a fighter, but he got downgraded to the operations platoon, a platoon. I don't remember the name exactly. It's some of these things that I need to really memorize unit sizes. Like you have platoon and one above that, and above that is a brigade, I think. So the one in between, company, I think. Anyway, he was downgraded because of medical reasons. His back was very problematic, I think. And very, very early on in his actual service, he was put at the kitchen for cleaning duty. In our unit, not the fighters, but the support people, we had basically I'm lacking up on the word. Two types of duties to do shifts in, beside of our regular jobs, our professional jobs, of cleaning or taking care of weapons, of taking care of the paperwork, of taking care of the communications, of being drivers, but not really, because drivers didn't do shit. Taking care of the equipment, the logistics. And the two types of duties were cleaning the kitchen and securing the base. Both of which the securing the base wasn't very competitive. We would just sit in a guarding spot or do patrols around the base, but we didn't really fight anyone because there was no one to engage. So we were basically just filling up a hole, a necessary hole, but whatever. So the guy went to the kitchen duty for cleaning, and apparently they worked him so hard that something in his back actually broke, and he was basically decommissioned for about a month or so. It was very brutal, and he was a tall guy, so you could look at him and say, oh yeah, that guy has back problems. And that was my first, actually he was my friend for the rest of my service, and it was a bad introduction to the bases and to the unit's shifts and duties, because I didn't know what it was like to do kitchen cleanup. Before that, in basic training and in the course I had, a professional course, all we did was clean up the dining room. We weren't allowed into the kitchen. And when I joined the battalion, my commander at the time said that I would get a full month with no duties, like as an introduction, which was pretty unheard of in that unit. I don't know why he did that. It was very unique, I guess, very special. And I just had that month of grace while I saw another guy with a broken back sleep in my room. Now, as I was in that room with no closable door, I was told that my platoon, I'm pretty sure that the word is platoon, had a guy who was away at the brigade. And I'm pretty sure that brigade is the correct word here as well. Okay, I checked it right now. It's platoon, company, battalion, brigade, whatever. So I was in the supportive company, in the communications platoon, and I heard that there was a guy in my platoon that was sent to the regional brigade, so he could learn the basics of my job, because he was also a fighter sent to the communications platoon. So I only heard of the guy, didn't know him, only heard the name. I also heard of another soldier who went missing, and by went missing I mean he refused to go to the battalion to show up because of reasons, because he didn't like the service, I guess. And I just spent my first week in the battalion in that room trying to figure out whatever I was supposed to do. On my second week, I was also sent on to the brigade, the regional brigade, so I could also learn hands-on what my job was. And during that time, the other soldier has returned to the battalion, and apparently he spent the time sleeping on my mattress, which I had signed. I signed my name to receive it from the logistics warehouse, and I even signed my name, my initials, on the mattress. And I went on to the brigade. I spent a fairly nice week there. It wasn't bad, it was very chill. And when I returned to the battalion a week later, I found that guy sleeping on my mattress and not giving half a shit about anything. He just slept there. I told him to get off my mattress, and he said, no, it's my room, it's my mattress. And I showed him my initials, and he said, fuck off. And when he woke up, he made coffee on my mattress, and he spilled some coffee on my mattress, and I had to show him again the initials so he would get off of it. But eventually he left that room, and it was just me and the other guy with a problematic back. And winter came, and we couldn't close the door, and it got very wet. But when my month of grace was over, and we moved to another base, and actually saw snow for the first time then, I was sent to the kitchen for cleaning. And that was awful. And that word also describes everything from that point on to a year and a half later. And during that time I did a lot of kitchen work, and all the time it was awful. Every time, all day long, it was terrible. And it usually was either a day during the week or the entire weekend. And it was supposed to be the soldiers of the company were supposed to be given shifts randomly and fairly and equally, but we made a log of all of the shifts, and we found it in the count that I did the most shifts of everyone in the entire company. I was only matched in like the guard duties with another person, but overall, guarding and kitchen, I had the most shifts of all, which was ridiculous. Now, why was it awful? The first shift, understandably, if there was snow, it was cold. The base wasn't very polished. It was a new base, a fairly new one, which meant that we had newish facilities. And by newish I mean they were actually new, and we had a lot of signs of the construction. I guess the story is that the base burned down years before that, and they decided to rebuild it. I guess, I don't know. So it was cold, and as you might expect, working in a cold kitchen cleaning things meant that your hands would get very, very cold when there was no heating, and there was no heating. So I got really cold, possibly got hypothermia, but nobody cares. Now, why were the rest of the shifts bad if they weren't all in the winter? One reason was that everything was hand washed, and I mean everything. The dishes, the pots and pans, and the equipment, and the tables in the dining room, and everything, absolutely everything. The ovens, the refrigerator, the tables in the kitchen rooms, in the processing rooms of the different meats, and everything was hand washed by the soldiers doing the cleaning duty. And that is very, very tiring and exhausting. And it would be nice if you had a large group of soldiers doing that every time, but usually it was like one or two people from the support company, and I don't know, 1 to 3 fighters from the company in the same base. And as it turned out, almost always, or most of the times, there were people missing. Because say you had one who was a friend with the cooks, then he wouldn't do shit. He would just go and sit down in the cook's office and not clean. Because why would he? Or she, for that matter. And I wasn't friends with any of them. So I had to clean everything, and they didn't even care. The cooks were terrible people, so they didn't even care enough to give us breaks or anything. As far as they were concerned, we were just manpower, faceless, characterless. I don't know. They didn't even care. They saw us as manpower to be used, as pawns for their cleanup. And they were terrible about that, because they were incredibly entitled. They would say that their job is the most difficult one, and I won't play down. It was very difficult, staying up, getting up early in the morning and going to bed late at night, and having to deal with the unwilling soldiers doing duty. One moment. Okay, I think I found a nice place to sit down. So the job wasn't great, and it was demanding, but that didn't mean they had to be assholes. And they were. And I'm not saying that all cooks are terrible, but the ones we had in our battalion were terrible. Terrible people, I mean. They weren't stellar cooks, most of them. We had one or two good ones, but the rest were just terrible, starting from their commander to most other cooks. Just, I don't know what is to say about them. Now, the first kitchen in the first base I had to work in, and I remind you, it is the new base in a place where it snowed. They had this corridor-like structure of a kitchen, where you had the base dining room, and in the corner of the dining room you had a doorway to the kitchen itself, where it started with the basic refrigerator for simple things, like if you made a salad you can just put it there, and when the meal came you just take it out and put it in the dining room. It's not for long-term storing. And then the corridor just went on, and when it took a turn you had the dishwashing room. Now in Israel, due to kosher rules, you had the dairy and the meat kind of dishwashing rooms, and they were just there. And then it took the turn and you had the cooking room. First you had the meat cooking room, and after that the dairy cooking room, I think, and after that maybe it was the other way around. It doesn't matter. Like, it was a corridor that was snaking around with rooms attached to it, and each room had its purpose. And of course we were supposed to clean everything, but the thing is that the rooms closest to the first refrigerator, which was again close to the dining room, was the cleaning room, the dish cleaning room. And that is important because the office where the cooks were was at the other end of that corridor. And why is that important, you might ask? Well, the answer is that they put their sound system on top of the refrigerator, which meant that when they put their awful music, and I say awful because it's their taste in music, and it is subjective, but it's very polarizing. The Israeli population is very polarized about their taste in the very specific genre of music, and I'm on the side that doesn't like that genre that they do. And whenever they put on their music, they would put it in a volume loud enough for them to hear it in the other end of the corridor. And for them to hear it loud enough, that meant that they had to put it really loud, and that meant that I had to hear it the loudest, as the one in the dish cleaning room. And that was probably dangerously loud, like health impeding loud, like hearing damage. And I didn't like that at all. And after months, that is a word I'm not able to say, the plural of months. After a lot of time with that, I got really, really angry. And with the constant berating of soldiers in my unit, in my platoon, and in my company, I was having really, really hard time in my battalion, in my service. I actually have a notebook with a diary of sort from that time, which I read before studying this, before going out to record this video. And it's not great. My thoughts and impressions written there were incredibly negative, like overwhelmingly so, and very depressing. Now, those cooks were assholes. They put on their music obnoxiously loud, and I told them, it's very loud, it could damage my hearing, I ask you to lower down the volume. And they didn't care. Their excuse or their solution was to tell me to put on my music louder in my earphones. Now, that's about the stupidest solution they could give, but then again, I don't really credit them for being smart, because if there's loud music and you increase the volume of your earphones, you're just increasing the amount of noise your ears receive. It doesn't matter that you hear your music better, because it's just louder and more dangerous. And they didn't care. That's a problem. They didn't care. They just told me to increase my volume and get back to work. And after a while, I wouldn't accept that, because A, it's terrible music, and I don't need to hear that. They could move their speakers elsewhere, but they didn't. They put it in the worst possible position, where I was the one subject to it the most, and they were the furthest possible away from that. And I wouldn't have it. So I started a strike of sort. I told them, until you turn down the music, I'm not going to work. I'm going to sit in the dining room and do nothing. And that sort of worked, because one of the cooks went and decreased the volume and told me to get back to work. And about as soon as I stood up and went into the dishwashing room, the asshole turned up the volume again. He thought that I wouldn't notice it, but the dishwashing room was immediately in front of the speakers of the refrigerator upon which the speakers was set. So I saw him reaching up for the sound system, the audio system, and raise the volume. And of course, I can hear him doing that. So I just stood up and went back to the dining room, and he was like, "Hey, what do you mean? I just turned down the volume for you. Why don't you go back to cleaning?" I told him, "You're not fooling anyone." But that was about the beginning of my clashes with the kitchen staff, because I also had problems. I'm not as tall as that guy, as that friend I had in that bedroom in the other base, but I'm still fairly tall. I'm 6'1", 1 meter and 85 centimeters. I'm fairly tall. I'm not the tallest person around, but I'm very tall. And my back is also subject for problems. And in fact, I do have a problem in my back. And I don't remember its English name, but it's when your spine is sort of crooked. You probably know. Now, I had that problem from the very beginning. I had it before I even joined the military. And I had those limitations where they said the commander or anyone in the military couldn't force me to stand up straight for an hour, I think. I think an hour. If I stood up for an hour, I would have to get 30 minutes of rest for each hour I was forced to stand up. And I had several more stuff like that. I couldn't carry more than 6 kilograms. I couldn't be forced to carry that weight. And those cooks didn't care. They didn't like it. As far as they were concerned, again, I wasn't the person. I was just a tool for cleaning the dishes. I was a dishwasher. And every time I demanded those rights, and there were rights, they had to give me those I don't know what to call them. Conditions. They were first to give me those conditions, and they didn't like it when I had those excuses to not work. And they most certainly didn't like it when I had a strike. And we had a lot of clashes like that. They were ignorant, Neanderthals, and I was in actual pains from working in the kitchen. And as I said earlier, I was the most fucked up soldier in terms of the shift distribution. And so I had a lot of clashes with them, and that came to a very drastic conclusion. The issue was that they had an inspection coming. The military works on inspections, where units function mostly individually within supposed standards, under, of course, the commands of superior units. But to upkeep those standards, you had a lot of inspections in every type of profession. If it was the human resources, they had inspections making sure that all the paperwork was fine, and if it was in the communications, they had to make sure that everything was up to standards, that everything was functioning right, that we had our stocks, that we weren't missing anything. Same for the logistics platoon. They had to make sure that all of their equipment was accounted for. And in the kitchen, it meant that they had to upkeep a certain standard of cleaning, of hygiene. And who else? I mean, when you have an inspection for hygiene, the cooks don't need to do anything because they have the soldiers cleaning for them, the dishwashers. So one time around the halfway point of my service, they had an inspection, and I was sent to the kitchen during that time, and they wanted everything spotless, I mean. And that was very tiring. Now, at some point, and I mean, my relation with those cooks was pretty bad at that point already. And they just saw me as a rebel, I guess, and they had the very strong need to give me orders and see me perform these orders, because they were on a power trip and they wouldn't have it any other way. They needed to see me do what they say, for their personal enjoyment. And they sent me around to clean up the kitchen, along with other soldiers, naturally. And at some point they sent me to clean up the meat refrigerator, the freezer, which they unplugged, and they removed everything from it. And when they told me to move a table around in the meat processing room, I told them I can't do that, it's too heavy, I'm not allowed to move that. So they actually moved it for me, but that pissed them even further. And then one of them told me to clean up the refrigerator, the freezer. And I did that. I took some dishwashing soap, which was whatever they gave us, and I squirted it inside of the freezer. And then I went with some water and I splashed it inside and I scrubbed it off, and it was clean. I went again with the water, and again it was clean. It had soap in it, it had water, it was scrubbed, it was clean. But the cook who gave me those orders was on a power trip. He wanted me to do things as he wanted, not as I wanted. And he didn't care for my cleaning. He didn't care for the cleaning of the freezer. He cared about me doing what he told me to do. And he didn't tell me to squirt the soap around and clean that. He told me to put some soap and some water in a bowl and use that to clean up the freezer. And I didn't do that. I just squirted the soap, splashed water, and cleaned it. But he wanted it that way, and not any other way. And to bring that point across, that meant that even if I spent 2 hours cleaning that freezer with 100 different techniques, with every cleaning product possible, as long as I didn't put soap and water in a bowl and use that to clean up the freezer, he would come to inspect my work and he would say, "That is not clean, do that again." And he did that. I mean, I think I cleaned up that thing 2 times, and in both times he said it wasn't clean because I didn't do it like he said. Because I didn't put soap and water in a bowl and cleaned that. And that pissed me off, because I wasn't there to be given commands and to be toyed around like that. I was there to clean up the place, and I cleaned it. And his standard for cleaning should be the cleaning, not the technique. And I told him that that was unacceptable, but he didn't care. He got mad. I think he told me to shut up and do my work, and I got really, really, really angry. And the part that I wouldn't stand at all was when he threw a curse word at me. He sweared. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but again, I looked at my diary and it said that he actually cursed me. And that threw me over the line, because I have standards myself. I can be told to do stuff I don't want. It was the military after all. I had to do things I didn't like. What I didn't have to do was take shit from anyone. Commanders could give me orders, they couldn't treat me with disrespect. So I told that guy, that cook, that he could go fuck himself and the entire kitchen, and I threw a couple of chairs around and I stormed off and went to my room. And I told my commander, I told him, I'm not going back in there. There's no way. I don't care. And my commander came to me pleading, because he had to send someone in, otherwise he would get in trouble with the other commanders in the battalion. And I told him I'm not going in there. And I think that eventually he himself went inside, maybe it was another time, I don't know. But I refused to go back into the kitchen after that thing. And I went to the mental health officer, which was in another base. It wasn't part of our unit, but it's a service that the military offers, along with the medical, I don't know, with medical options. Within every unit has a doctor, so every few units have mental health officer, who had quite a decent amount of power to allow soldiers to not do work, sort of. And I went to a couple of those officers before. I went to one who was just terrible at her work. I went to her after I had a violent outburst, because it was several months in my unit and people were terrible, they were assholes, and someone would open the flap of the tent during some training and he would blow cigarette smoke at my face, knowing very well that I hated the smoke. And people were just very abusive. And one time I had an outburst and I kicked a guy in the neck and he hit me back in the head and we were both punished. And afterwards I was allowed to go to the mental health officer, and she was terrible because she just looked at that situation and she told me, well, I see that you're having trouble with the other soldiers and that they're making fun of you, but since you had that clash, since you had that violent outburst, did they still bother you? I said, actually no, now that I think of it, they kind of stopped. And she said, oh, well, that's okay. I mean, if they stop, then that's a good thing. And I'm like, kicking a guy in the head, in the neck, which could cause a paralysis if done strong enough, and I didn't hold back, actually. I had my boot on, so it was added weight to it. That's no solution. That's not something you should strive towards. And I knew it was wrong, and I told her it was wrong, but she didn't care. She didn't care about me at all. As far as she was concerned, everyone who was coming to her was just trying to get out of duty. And I was trying to find any solution, actually, because I was having a lot of issue with those people. And I stopped seeing her, and I had that issue in the kitchen, and again I asked to go to the mental health officer, which was changed since. There was now a guy officer, and when I went to him, he recognized that this was an issue, my presence in the kitchen, and I told both my officer and him that whether or not he gave me leave to not go to the kitchen anymore for duty, for cleaning duty, for shifts, whether or not he did that, I would still not go to the kitchen whatsoever. Even if it included punishment, I wouldn't go there again, because it was terrible, and I could sit here in this place for an hour and recall any memory I had from the kitchen duties, and I would still not be done. Like, we had a base with an overflowing sewage draining in the kitchen, and I had to stay there, and the smell was just so bad that I would actually lose my, how do you call it? Doesn't matter. It was just so bad. And when I had to clean the pot where they made the omelette, I had to use the degreaser, and the mixed smell of the omelette with the degreaser, it blocked my brain to the point where I couldn't eat any omelette for like a month, because the smell would just disgust me. It was revolting. It was just terrible. So I told him that whether or not he gave me a leave, I wouldn't go back to the kitchen. And he gave me a leave. he said that he would give a recommendation to my officer, to my commander, that I wouldn't go back to the kitchen. And I later looked it up, and it turned out that the recommendation from that kind of officer, the mental health officer, is actually a command to every other commander. So if he recommended that I wouldn't go back in the kitchen, that meant that I was not allowed to be sent to the kitchen whatsoever. And yeah, after a while, even my commander got switched, and I told him that I got a recommendation from the mental health officer to not go into the kitchen, and he said, "Oh, okay, so I guess you're just not going back to the kitchen." And so that was about the halfway point of my service, around the year and a half, after which I didn't go back into the kitchen. And that is basically my story for my military service in the kitchen duty, instead of actually doing my job. Now, my job wasn't exactly exhilarating, because I was about the most qualified person in my platoon doing that job. The vast majority of other soldiers were just fighter dropouts who didn't actually study the subject, the field. They didn't learn how to do the job, and they never bothered to do that, to learn it. Like the soldier I told earlier, who went to the brigade for the week and slept on my mattress. And the other soldiers that just didn't care. So about 80% of the job laid on my shoulders, mostly. I might be exaggerating, because we did have a few others. We had one soldier who worked on the computers. I was part of the communications, the radio, but she did the computers, and I had another soldier who also did the radios with me. And we had another guy who went to the same course, but he was supposed to be a photographer, but they didn't let him. It was an entire story. But even he didn't really do the job. And the girl soldier who was also working the radios with me, she said she didn't know how to do the things, despite doing the same things as me. And she couldn't carry the heavy things around, but neither could I. So it was an entire issue. And as time went on, those two girls went away and were replaced with other people, less experienced ones, but some were more motivated. And it just ended up being me carrying the platoon, doing a lot of things. I'm not saying all things, because I wasn't into the office work and printing labels and beautifying things, because that seems stupid. But I did a lot to carry that unit's radio services. It was absurd. But I don't know, by the time I finished my service, around the last, 6 months before I finished my service, there was a new recruit in my platoon, and I had to teach her everything. And around the last month, I think, my commander got switched again, my 4th commander now. And he was also fairly clueless. He counted on me to teach him how to do most things. I mean, he knew how to do things, but he really counted on me to help him and help him catch up. And he was a good guy. He was really a good guy. But that meant that I had to do a lot more. And by the time I finished my service, I ended up doing a lot. Like, a lot. And I actually felt like I finished my service, because I spent 3 years of my life giving my time to the military, to the country, as I was raised to do, to expect, to plan ahead. I just knew that I would give my time to the military, and I did. I gave my time to the military, and by that I gave my time to the country. And I was fine with that. I mean, it was terrible. The time was awful, but I was fine with doing that, with the concept. I felt accomplished. And when the time came for me to finish my service, I had a short vacation of 2 weeks, I think. Like many other soldiers get, 2 weeks. Soldiers usually take their remaining vacation time and put it all together for one last vacation before they finish their service. And when I returned with my service-long friend with a bad back, we came to the base, and it was disgraceful, to say the least. It was just bad because of a multitude of issues. Most commanders wanted to be like, we had to fill up a form and have all of the commanders sign that we went and make sure that we had all ties. You say lose ties. What do you say about the opposite? We wouldn't have any. They had to sign up that we didn't have any loose ends, and that everything was wrapped up. And as it turned out, that almost half of the commanders in the company, they wanted to be the last ones to sign that form. I don't know why. You would come to them and they would say, no, come to me last. And you'd go to the next one and you would sign it. To the next one and he would sign it. And you would go to the next one and he would say, no, come to me last. You go to the next one and he would also say, no, come to me last when you're done. And by the end of that, out of like 8 or 9 people, you had 4 people who told you to go to them last. And if you went to them, they would say, no, it's not done yet. You need to come to me last. It was just stupid. And one of the requirements was to go to the company commander, and he had to give you a talk, like an appreciation talk, telling you how much your service was important and everything like that. And the thing is that during my vacation, they got a new commander, a new company commander. The one that was there when I came back to my last day, I never saw him. I didn't know who he was, I didn't know his name, I didn't know anything about him. And yet I had to wait for him to go out of a meeting and give me the talk. And I spent several hours there doing that. I had to wait, and in the end, his second in command, who I did know, he gave me the talk, which felt very cheesy and cheap. Like, we appreciate your service, and you did great, and you blah 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 blah. And during that, and that was after I was left to sit outside for an hour, doing nothing and not being let. I don't know. Wouldn't be let finish the process. And with the entire unit being terrible and shit, and the people were being human refuse. They he didn't sell that point. It really didn't work. And when you finish the service, they give you a piece of paper that you can show in job interviews with your commander's impressions, and it's like a recommendation letter, and mine was written and signed by the previous commander, who was terrible. He was just a really stupid person, and if he sees this video, then you're one of 4 of my commanders, and if you were terrible, you should know that you were terrible. I had 4 commanders. One was a manly man, but for a short time. The other was a weak man who got really good after a year, and then he got switched with a terrible man. And nearing the end of my service, in the last month, he got switched with a very good man, a good person, the last commander who counted on me to help him. But the one before last, he was terrible, and his letter of how will you call it? It was full of spelling mistakes, and it was very embarrassing. And if I were to go with that to a job interview, it was not very impressive. And I thought that at some point, because I knew the mailing system, I knew that the guy got an email telling him, you have these 2 soldiers who were going to be released in late July 2015, and you had to write the letters for them. And he had to sign it and send it to the human resources, and they had to send it over to a higher ranking human resources unit, and they had to print it and send it back. And the human resources gave me that letter when I finished my service. And what do you know? In no part of that chain of command, of that change of whatever, nobody bothered to open up that letter and spell check it. And it was embarrassing. And to be told that you finish 3 years of service for your country in an awful unit, and you receive such a disrespectful treatment, it's terrible. Like, it's unacceptable. And on top of that, in the same package with the same envelope with that recommendation letter, there was the card that says that I have finished my service and that I'm now in the reserves service. And that card is supposed to have a color matching the type of service that the soldier had. Like, if you worked at a desk, you would get a bronze, or actually brown, card. If you were a support soldier like me, who worked directly with fighters, who worked at dangerous places close to the front lines, then you're supposed to be given a silver card, or in practice a gray one. And if you were a fighter, you should get a gold one or an orange one, and that marked a certain status symbol, because that meant that you did something in your service. They gave them colors to give meaning to people's service, to thank them, to say, see, it wasn't all in vain. Like, you got something. We recognize your contribution, your special contribution. And when I opened that envelope and I got that letter with the spelling mistakes, I also noticed that that card was brown. It wasn't. It was bronze. It wasn't silver. It was brown and not gray. And that meant that despite spending 2 years and 9 months of my service, out of the 3 years, 2 years and 3/4 I spent in a battalion, in a frontline battalion, in high risk conditions, with terrible people, and despite not leaving the service at any point, without running away, I wasn't recognized as a support soldier. I was recognized as a desk worker, which defines my first 3 months of service, which included the basic training and the course, which of course they weren't the support role, they were some more desk worthy jobs. And I got a brown card, and that pissed me off. That was disgraceful. Like, how do you get to that point? How does a system, an automated system, does that? How does it do that? And I got very pissy about it. And I asked the human resources people in my unit, and they told me, we don't know, just try to go to they call it a city officer, which is a guy, it's like an office. And while I don't live in Tel Aviv, the closest one to me is in Tel Aviv, and they do this sort of work, like print out new cards, new ID cards of those for soldiers. And that's all they could tell me. Eventually they let me go. I came with a car. I took my friend. We took another person in the battalion because she had to go somewhere, and we drove back home. And at that point, I was just pissed. I was bothered because that's no way to treat a person. I know I'm not special in that I did my service, because everyone does that. But I did give 3 years of my life for that, and I expected some recognition. And in the end, I got tossed around between officers who didn't want to sign my form, and I was given a very shameful card saying that my type of work wasn't recognized, and I was given a letter of recommendation which specifies my commander's opinion on me, and that thing is full of spelling mistakes. And that pissed me off. That was embarrassing. That was inappropriate. And at that day, I contacted the body that regulates the military. There is a special body, in Hebrew it's called Netziv Akvilot, or Netzivut Akvilot. It's like a guy who has his own unit, who operates outside of the military's power, and he has the power to look at the way the military works, find where it lacks in standards, in guidelines. Like if you have a singular abusive commander somewhere in the military, you can't find it always. But if a soldier is being abused by a commander, he can't go to the commander to complain. He can't go to his commander to complain. He has to go to somewhere else, and that unit, that body, is that someone else. That guy can send an investigation force, and they can investigate that commander and find that he did do something wrong, and they could demote him, and they could kick him from that role. They could punish him, they can do a lot of things, and that extends to bad facilities, like if a base has an exposed sewage in the base, if the facilities are incredibly bad. Everything that could be wrong can be addressed, can be reported and addressed and fixed by that unit, by that organization. I don't know. So the guy himself, his role is Netziv Akvilot, and his unit is the Netzivut. And throughout the service, every soldier knows that if his commanders are being problematic, if he doesn't get his proper night sleep, if his rights are violated, he could report the officers. And soldiers always use that as a threat for the commanders. If you don't let me go, I will report you. And in basic training, commanders are very scared of that. They try to be all showy and tough, but they are afraid of that. And I had every right to use that Netzivut unit thing several times in my service, because one time the cooks refused to give us breakfast because of reasons, and the rules of the military say that they have to provide us with 3 meals each day, and breakfast is one of them. So I could report them, but I didn't. I was too afraid. And when I finished my service, I finally reported them. Not the cooks, I reported the unit. And not exactly the unit, I just said that my release from the military was disgraceful. And that's what I said. I said that it was disgraceful. That I was just tossed around people and told to waste my time waiting for the people. And in the end of the day, I got that letter with all of those spelling mistakes. And I got that card that didn't recognize the type of service I had and had done. And my letter, my report was responded to. And the guy called me. Not the guy, but a guy who works there. He called me and asked me again to explain the situation. And I explained it, like I did to you. And he asked what sort of recommendation the human resources gave me. And I told him they advised that I go to the city officer in Tel Aviv. And he said, yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe you should do that. And after a week or so, or a few days, I went there and they did fix my card. They gave me, they issued a gray one, which was okay. And the issue of the spelling mistakes in the letter, I guess the guy called the unit. He contacted the unit, the battalion, to to investigate the issue. Like, how could that thing happen? And very hurriedly, the battalion sent my short-term officer, the one who was there just a month before I left, and they sent him with no water or food or anything. They just gave him an envelope with my revised letter, and they sent him off to my house, where he showed up. And it was August, it was hot, and he was just drenched in sweat, and he was dehydrated. And I felt really bad for him, because it wasn't his issue, it was the issue of the previous commander. And he showed up, and I had to give him some water, and I thanked him. And yeah, he gave me that fixed letter, which I now have still. And yes, that report I submitted to that body, that Netzivut, it worked, because I reported wrongdoing in the military, something that went wrong, and they fixed it. They made the phone calls, they flexed a few muscles, and they got things fixed. But it's not great that it had to come to that point. Things in the military shouldn't, or things in general, shouldn't reach the point where people's rights and dignity are harmed, to the point where they need to go and report it to a higher, let's call it a higher being, to fix everything up. And unfortunately, that happens in the military, in the Israeli Defense Force. The thing that I see a lot on YouTube, where people say it's God's army, blessed, whatever. It's not perfect, and you shouldn't think of it as perfect. You shouldn't think of it as demonic either. The military has a lot of moral rules and guidelines, and rules of engagement are very strict. And I never got to shoot at anyone. I wasn't allowed to shoot at anyone without the clear risk of life. They're very strict. For the sake of being moral, to not harm anyone. Like, rules of engagement say that there is a very specific distance a person must be of a target before he is allowed to open fire, assuming that the person hasn't identified and he looks suspicious and all of that. And during nighttime, like, that distance is shortened by a lot. Like, you can't shoot in such a distance and be accurate. You just can't. So you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to shoot at a person who is very far away for the sake of stopping them. I don't mean in a situation where they have to kill to shoot. Shoot to kill, I mean. But in cases where it's like shoot to disable. If someone is suspicious, if someone is chasing you, running at you with a knife over a long distance, you don't have to shoot to kill them. You can shoot at their leg and disable them. But over a long distance, you can't shoot them. You can't be sure you shoot them in the leg. You might hit something vital, so you're not allowed to. You need to wait for them to get closer. And during that time, you could be risked. You could be, I don't know. You could pull something out, something dangerous. I don't know. So the Israeli Defense Forces, they're not perfect. Not everything in the media is 100% right. Not for good, not for bad. We're not demonic, we're not angelic. It's just the military. And it's been about 5 years since I finished my service. And about 7 years since I wrote those pages in the notebook, in that diary. And it's painful to read. It's still unpleasant to recall, but that's just how it is. It was a bad time. I didn't like my service, and now that I need to be in reserves every now and forever until the age of 45, I don't like that. I want that to be over as soon as possible, if not already over. And yeah, I think that's it for this time.